Hello everyone, how you guys doing? Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day, and it is Monday, so that means, again, we have another PWCC weekly review where I go through the top 100 soccer card items that were auctioned off this week. Of course, as always, if you enjoy, make sure to leave a like. It lets me know that you enjoy them, and also would love to hear your thoughts down below in terms of what happened in the auction. But without wasting any time, let's go ahead and get into it. So let's get started here this week. We're starting at $216, which is a bit higher than prior weeks. First, we have a 1972 Eusebio. Something I've been noticing just in general with Eusebios is no matter the grade, and really no matter the year, as long as it's a Portuguese Eusebio from playing career, it seems to do good numbers. 216 for a PSA 1. They always look so intricate, just so beautiful in terms of the design that you typically find in Portugal. And also typically there's a lot of like taller, tighter sort of stickers, and I don't know if Eusebio is actually just that lengthy or is portrayed that way, but either way, in my mind, he is that at this point, so it seems to go hand in hand. We also have a Beckenbauer auto. We see a couple of these almost every week. We'll see another one here in a second. 216. It feels, I mean, it always feels pretty strong to me, but I do understand that, you know, Beckenbauer auto should mean something. I mean, he's an all-time great, so it is what it is. But, I mean, this card in a 7.5, you could probably find it for, you know, $5 to $30, somewhere in there, pretty much a guarantee. Well, above that, we have a 1924 Zamora. I looked this up just because I was interested in seeing if a 7.5 was really all that impressive. Turns out, I mean, not, you know, anything too crazy. There's another 7, couple 4s, a 6, a 5. I mean, it is highest grade, at least from the sold listings that we can find. And PWCC confirms that. One of one ungraded higher, so 216 there. True rarity typically wins out over condition rarity and vintage, but still, an early Zamora in high grade is a fun one. Not much to add on either of the others. We have an early UK card and a dual Italian auto. Moving on up, Silver Select 2016 PSA 10 Messi going for 222. Feels, I mean, pretty solid, I would say. You don't see a lot of silver PSA 10s from key years going for good money here on PWCC, so that's a nice sale, I would presume. Then we have the 2004 Ronaldo Mega Cracks. This is sort of the PMG-esque sort of card. Obviously, you know, being very facetious by calling it a PMG, it doesn't look very good at all. But it has the blank green background, and so that's just sort of reminiscent of it. Pretty good sale, though, 222. A PSA 10 did 800 to 900 during the week on eBay. That was a talking point in the Discords this week. So yeah, I mean, decent sale, but at the same time, you'd expect more of these to get graded. It says just one graded higher in the pop. That's not true. I saw 4 PSA 10s, so it would seem as if that's changing, you know, by the month, by the week, who knows really. A 68 to 70 Vanderhoek Cruyff in a PSA 3 going for 222. I thought this was a decent price, or at least maybe cheap, but then I looked at the back and it's pretty obviously torn there on the top right. In my book, that's not a PSA 3. Typically, PSAs, you know, grading a PSA 1 or 2 on something with paper loss on the back. Not the case here. Really unsure as to why, but you always have to look for that on your own. In this row, a couple Dutch legends. We have a 2003 Robin van Persie Votebal in a PSA 10. Did look this up just to see. I thought it was a little bit lower, and it was indeed. So the last one was 300. The ones before that were 400. And only 2 to sell in the last 6 to 7 months. So you would presume that they would do decent, but they really haven't. And 234 for him. This Cruyff is a 1974 PSA 8, so this is World Cup year, and this was pretty cheap. So PSA 6 before this went for 138. This was an 8 with a PWCC A sticker for the eye appeal, and that goes for 234. Before this, an SGC 6 in March was doing 222. So I'd say relatively that looks like quite the deal. I mean, back in the day, you know, even Raws were doing big numbers last year, so that's a good deal for whoever got that. Top 30% eye appeal, you know, I guess isn't going to be all too crazy, but it should have some sort of premium, and this didn't at all. Then we have one of the many Verlongs from 1958. This is sort of a crying Pele type of moment. 234 there for a PSA 2. Next to a Hugo Sanchez, a flawless out of 15, going for 240, which feels like a decent price. I've seen some Hugo Sanchez flawless go very cheap, just generally speaking. So I'd say that this is a pretty decent price for something just in a NBA Authentic. Speaking of NBA Authentic, we have another one here for Uwe Zähler going for 240. Feels pretty strong. We've seen some BVGs in, you know, BVG 4 to 5 range go for a little bit cheaper than this, so decent price to pay for the raw. It doesn't really indicate much of a problem, but realistically, the back and whether or not it's stuck is going to be a big factor. And just trusting, you know, this sort of authentication doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Someone paid $3 to $4 for this to happen when they could have paid, $15 to $20 to get it graded by PSA or, any of the grading companies if they really thought it was worthwhile. Art at Stanley Matthews going for $240. One of the most notable, I would say, in terms of, vintage UK releases and most widely recognized more so. We have a Pep Guardiola 1991 Este and a PSA 7 going for $252. Prior to this sale of $250, there was a PSA 8 that sold on best offer just a couple weeks ago for $1,500, so I guess relative to that, it seems like a steal. But the last PSA 7 did sell for $170, so actually, from last sale, up almost 50%. This PSA 8 seems like a super high price, if I'm going to be honest. I know it's best offer on eBay. Someone might have paid up because of that, but that's a scary price, especially if a 9 or a 10 comes out. I mean, and Pep's a manager, A lot of managers really don't hold very, very well in terms of card prices. Now, he probably should more so than almost anyone, but at the same time, you have to be concerned about the longevity of the name in the spotlight of the hobby. Another Beckenbauer auto here in a 7 going for $252. PSA 6 of the Top Liga Messi going for $264, which is a pretty decent sale. We've seen some foils go, I think we saw a PSA 7 foil at one point go for $350. So relative to that, this is strong, but I think that was just a super low sale for the foil. In this row, a PSA 3 Ronaldo from the Mundi Deportivo, $264 for a PSA 3. Typically, the 5s have been in near 1,000 range, so I guess a 3 at that price seems to make sense to me. PSA 8 Bobby Moore. This is highest graded from this set. Pop 105, none higher, at least from what PWCC tells me. Always got to double check that if you're really interested. But yeah, I see this sticker a good bit. So obviously, Panini Calciatore, not going to be too rare. But Bobby Moore, again, should be pretty respected. And this is an early, nice-looking Bobby Moore, certainly. We have a 64 Panini Calciatore Pele in a PSA 4 going for $276. Another good grade San Giorgio going this week for the Florian Albert PSA 5, $275 right there. A Kaká 2003 PSA 8 going for $288. It feels, pretty strong for, not the most desired Kaká rookie going for, almost $300 on a PSA 8. Seems pretty good. PSA Pops say it's pretty rare, but, hard to really trust that, I guess, when talking about modern stickers from Brazil, at least from my perspective. Next row, nothing too special. I will say I do like the 1979 Crack Maradona just because it's the same picture as the 78, but much more blown up and looks pretty good. Personally, I'd like to have one at some point, but, as to when, I am unsure. But SGC 3 going for $300, Pop 1 of 1, none higher. Doesn't seem like too bad of a price, as we've seen a lot of these go in the weekly, and, this isn't a bad grade by any means. Yeah, so I wanted to look at prices just to kind of get an idea, and there was a PSA 1 that sold for $250 on eBay. This was a best offer. So, relatively, SGC 3 is much better than that. $200 again in February. So, it comes from a set with a lot of different odd and end Maradonas that I'm really not a fan of. But if I was a fan of one of them, I think this would be it, since it has the lineage from 78. And it's a nice picture, I think. So then we have a blue Prism Messi out of $299. Wanted to look this up. This one goes for $312. Before this, they've been floating around between $250 and $400. So this is about smack dab in the middle, which to me is pretty impressive. Most people, I would imagine, had in their mind that, Prism's going to come out, there's going to be really high sales for all the Messi, and then they're going to fall off a cliff. And, maybe that cliff is just further down the road, or maybe there is no cliff, and it's going to be time that tells. But at the end of the day, $312 for an out of $299 Messi and a PSA 9, pretty impressive, I would say, for ultra modern. Definitely just keeps on keeping on. Here we have a 2003 Arjen Robben going for $312 right there. So a decent premium over Van Persie that we saw earlier. Pele 1967 in a PSA 6 goes a little bit more than the 64 in a PSA 4 that we saw earlier. Moving up in this row, we have a few odd and ends. A Stanley Matthews from 1934 that is priced a little bit higher than the Art Ath, but also in one higher of a grade. Again, you can typically find these in high grades, so it's not, crazy rare to find a PSA 8, but it is an important sticker. Next to that, a Rui Costa. This is a pocket calendar that has him on it. It is Panini branded. Highest grade, Pop 1 of 1. It goes for $324. And then next to that, we have a PSA 6 Campio Messi rookie going for $336. Felt pretty strong to me. I looked it up, and basically it was right in line with all the other comps. But I think the PSA 5s, 6s, 7s, those hold really strong, at least from what I'm seeing. There was sort of a time where they were teetering in between whether or not they were holding or not, and I mean, they seem pretty strong to me. I mean, no matter whether or not it's eBay, PWCC Gold, and almost every time I see them sell, it's a decent price, and you would think some would fall through, but they just typically don't. 2004 Zidane in a PSA 9, so this is the same as the Ronaldo we saw earlier. This one, there is only one in a PSA 10 from what I think I remember seeing, so this is actually, I guess, a little bit harder to grade, at least for the moment, but it's so early to be able to tell. We have a 1970 Van der Hout Cruyff in a PSA 7 doing 336. Then we have a Bobby Charlton 1958 DC Thompson. I'm interested in this. I don't really know what's going on. I mean, obviously it did this price because of the auto, I would assume. Authentic auto. Looks like maybe an older auto. I mean, it's not in the modern Sharpie that you would expect, but yeah, pop 1 of 1, none higher. I'm not too familiar with this as a rookie, so if anyone has any information, I'd be interested. From what I was gathering, I think it's a cutout of some sort, and I think it's 1958, but the photo throws me off because I think this photo's used in the Chicks one that's from 1959, and so the Bobby Charlton rookies are honestly a mess in my head. So if someone can sort this one out for me, I would appreciate that greatly. But nonetheless, I always love on-card autos, especially of, old legends, because they're going to be much harder to find and much more of a hunt, I guess, in that regard. So good price there, and I think a good buy if you're someone collecting Charlton. Knowing very little about it, you always feel good about an on-card auto, authenticated. 1972 Eusebio, again sticking to the theme from earlier, really nice looking, going for 350. This Garincha PSA 4 goes for 360. We'll talk about that in a second. I feel like that's just kind of low relative. You have a 1951 Kubala. This is, I mean, it's not the most notable Kubala quote-unquote rookie, but to me, it's sort of got the Aquarella feel to it, where I've seen it so many times now, and it looks so good that it speaks to me in that way. Maybe it's not the most respected by, Kubala collectors. I'm sure that's the case, but to me, it sort of holds some luster at this point, which is, all part of this weird world of collecting that we're involved in. This PSA 9, Robert Lewandowski, I actually wasn't going to look this up, but this feels kind of light. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, so this one goes for 384. Last one before this was 480, and that was almost 3 months ago, so there hasn't been a PSA 9 to sell since then. 450 before that, 500, 650, and it's only going to keep going higher and higher. So Lewandowski's been falling off a lot, and I think that's kind of fair. I mean, Lewandowski was talk of the town at one point, getting the Ballon d'Ors round from him, beating the goal-scoring record in the Bundesliga. Everything was sort of going his way. Now he's on Barca, and Barca without Messi doesn't have the same Barca feel where they're, an absolute crucial point to the hobby and everyone's sort of a Barca fan. That's no longer the case. So I think he sort of has slipped back a little bit out of the spotlight, and I think that makes sense. I mean, someone like Luis Suarez at this point doesn't get talked about at all, and I think, you can make a case for him, Lewandowski, and maybe a couple other strikers that you can pick and choose, all sort of being in the same echelon. And so, some will bounce up, some will bounce back, and I think they all sort of stay in that realm. Another player that's sort of in that weird realm of, is he collectible, is he not? And I'm sure to some people he is. I'm not saying he's not. But Stevie G here for 384. I guess the reason I say that is, English midfielders throughout the history, I'm sure there's many greats, but in the hobby, no one talks about almost any of them. Obviously, Stevie G, Lampard, they have much more of a meaning to the modern people because it just happened, and they're club legends and all that stuff. So I respect it by all means, but I'm just, comparing the two, just, having fun. We have a 93 Roberto Carlos in a PSA 7. This one goes for 384. Last PSA 6 did 126, then 264. And, I mean, relative to those sales, there's not many PSA 7s from what I can find. So, seems to be about right in line, and decent grade pop 1 of 2, just 2 higher, at least for now. And also a card, so if you're into cards more than stickers, that's a fun little side addition as well. This is what I was talking about. I mean, Didi is someone that I imagine should be respected in the hobby, but I never would really expect the hobby to actually respect him because, he's sort of an ancillary piece in terms of how the hobby is going to remember vintage Brazilian soccer, right? To most people, it's just Pele. I think to, a little bit more culture of a mind, it should be Pele and Garincha. And then if you want to go, even more so beyond that, then you're going to have, all the odds and ends that pop up. And there's going to be a lot of different players since that team was as good as it was. But a PSA 4 Garincha going for, just a little less than a PSA 5 Didi feels light to me. I don't know if that's someone set collecting. Maybe Didi really does have that that relevance in terms of vintage. I don't know. I just think the Grinch won a little cheap. I'm not trying to take a hit at DD, but to me, I would much rather own the Grinch than the DD. And that is, no slight to him. Dennis Bergkamp, 91, 92. Merlin going for a little over 400 in PSA 8. I did look this one up as well, just interested. PSA 7 before this went for 150, and PSA 8 before this went for 336. So I guess relative to those two, and that's what we'll take a peek at, pretty good sale. Higher than the last ones. I've seen this card with an auto before. I think it was released that way, and maybe in rookie year, at least from the story that I was reading in Discord. But you always got to take those with a grain of salt. Do more research. Not really my market, but just something to think about if you are in that realm. In this row, I'll keep it moving. Messi for near 500. The white. This is actually, I guess, sort of the only notable thing from this row. I thought that this was showing a huge discrepancy between the blue. I mean, I'm not going to scroll all the way back, but we saw the blue in a PSA 6 Campio going for like 330-ish, and this goes for 432 and an 8, which I think is fair. There's a lot of whites that grade in higher grade because they have no colors on the edges, and it's much easier to grade. This is Campio. It says Campione. The next one also is Campio, so they go for the same price. Initially, I thought that there was some value to be had on the Campio, but they are both Campio, so nothing has changed. From here, we're just going to scroll for a little bit because there's really not much I want to add. There's going to be a lot of Hollands here. This Messi purple, I mean, it's a notable sale, but it's a pretty common Topps Chrome color. PSA 9 purple, I mean, nothing to write home about, I guess. But it is, of course, a nice card. I'm not hating it. But when you're next to a Topps Chrome Holland base, I mean, that's the realm you're playing in. You could say one's undervalued, one's over. That's not for me. I'll just keep it scrolling. Up here, another, Holland. So what do we have? Like 5 Hollands there out of this row. An early Panini Calciatore Pele in a PSA 6, along with the Duncan Edwards rookie. We'll see another one of him here in a bit from the same year. In this row, I thought it was a fun one. You have a Robert Lewandowski PSA 9 going for a good premium over the other one. This is more rare, especially in higher grades. Why that's the case is sort of up for debate. No one, I don't think, has an answer. At least I've heard one. Could just be it was short printed. Could be that, maybe you could buy one from the website, but you couldn't buy the other. Maybe there was fakes out there that got printed of one, but not the other. I don't know. I don't know what it is. But for some reason, this is much more rare than the other, which is why it does the premium it does. Then we have a Totti PSA 9 for 600, along with this 666 for a Pele Titulares PSA 1. So I thought this was, I mean, at least it was eye-catching to me, right? And I don't really follow the Pele rookie market too much because, honestly, there's just a lot of them, and they are all pretty much very expensive. I mean, $700 for a PSA 1 isn't cheap. But at the same time, I thought it looked pretty good. You can tell that there's sort of this wavy, wrinkly sort of action going on the edges here, which I think plays a role. But, colors are good. Front doesn't look terrible, and the back actually looks pretty decent. So 660 for that, I didn't feel was terrible. And this is part of what I like about, really notable items in soccer that have been traded for a while is we can see right now 660, right? And we scroll back and, 1,500, 2,000. I mean, there were times where it was really expensive. And then we get to pre-soccer boom, right? And Titulares PSA 1 at the time was anywhere from 300 to 400-ish in 2019, 2016. And now it's 600. So I think in a space that's grown as much as soccer has, I think that that's great value. Now, again, like I mentioned earlier, I think in general, Pele has a ton of rookies and so many options that people can kind of get lost. And even if you're a collector, you might feel very overwhelmed. So I'm not saying anyone should go down this path, go invest in Pele, go buy it all up. I'm just saying, I think value-wise, that those are very fun ones. And I think the Titulares set, at least, from what I've gathered, seems to be pretty rare. It seems, at least relative to early Peles, and I like the look of it. I think it's a great set. This isn't the more desirable of the two in that set, and there's variations and all that jazz, but I think that that's a really good price if you're a buyer. Some sticker autos, had a recent video about how I feel about sticker autos. I stand by that. I think most of them are just ridiculously overpriced. Like, when we're in the year 2035, who's going to care about a 2021, 2022 out of 10 FIFA Road to the World Cup PSA 10 pink fluorescent David Beckham sticker auto? I just don't know. I don't think anyone, and I guess we'll see. I could be wrong, but that's just how I feel. 1975 Paolo Rossi in a PSA 7 goes for 720. We see these do good numbers. Earlier Panini Calciatore in high grade, Italian legend, all that good stuff. This is the higher selling of the two titulares from yesterday in a PSA 1. This one, I mean, front looks a little bit better. The colors are a little bit more blurry, but you also have sort of the staining on the bottom, and the back's a good bit worse. Personally, yeah, I think it's close. I'd probably rather have the other since I like the clean back, but at the same time, I can understand both, and I think they're both great Peles. Speaking of another great Pele, I'll just gloss over the zebra in the middle of the screen. This is a 1969 Baggioli. This is a card where basically you can detach part of it, redeem it for points, and so typically you'd expect that to have happened. The left would have been removed. This one did not. Personally, I mean, aesthetically, I'd rather have the left part removed, but it's sort of those, it's like the same thing as 90s basketball where you have, you can peel off the coating from the refractors. Probably looks better that way, but at the same time, has some more scarcity if not. So this Pele looks really good. There was a Jared Muller that went in this auction. There was a Bobby Charlton, I do believe, as well. So it was a fun one, I would say. And they all look really, really good. The colors pop very well. Then in this row, we have a couple Messis. Color Blast, PSA 9 Campeon. This is about the same price we see all the time for this. Color Blast about in that range. Pele Multi-Language, PSA 6. I was interested in this just to see sort of where it's been, where it's going. The last PSA 4 went for $612. That was a multi-language back. So, I mean, a PSA 6 going for $810 feels like quite the deal, at least relatively to that. If you go back and look at, like, again, this is what you can do with prominent stickers that were cared about before the boom. If you go all the way back, they do get pretty cheap, at least in terms of what people were paying for this. Now, it's not multi-language back or whatever, but, PSA 7 Pele in 2017 was $60. So this is sort of one of the things where when I'm comparing I guess the titulares with something like this is, this could have, and this doesn't say multi-language, so of course you have to take that into account, all the fun stuff. But basically, Pele World Cup stickers still wildly up from where they were pre-soccer boom, while something like titulares is almost, getting back to pre-boom prices. So I always think that that's a fun one to look at. At the same time, you can't take that as gospel, like just because one's up a lot and one isn't, that doesn't mean that the one that isn't is, a super buy, because there's tons of situations in vintage where there's a reason that things work out that way. So you always have to sort of be scaling this out in your head, but just something to think about. And then in this row, keeping it Messi and Pele themed, this is a PSA 8 Monday Chromo that went for $900. I looked at the chart, so, want to zoom in because that's the only way we're going to get any information out of this, really. PSA 6 is up 6% over the last 6 months. And if we look, there seems to have sort of been a bottoming out process, possibly. From March to April, seemed to hit about, 500, 550 at times. And now this is the highest sale that we've seen since this 1500, which honestly, if you eliminate that from the graph, this is the highest sale in the last 6 months. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe that's just someone that got really excited on a buy it now, but I don't know why you would get that excited when every sale is, $800 or $700 and you just pay double. I'd imagine, especially with something like the Monday Chromo Pop 350, there's others out there. You don't have to stretch like that. So, it seems like the highest sale basically in the last 6 months, which is notable, I would say. We then have a matchbook Pele going for $1,000, so you can crack it out of the slab, light some of the fires that you need during, post-apocalyptic times where you're lighting all your cardboard on fire, because that's all it's worth. You'll have a fun Pele to match that set then. 2018 Panini Donruss Lionel Messi Optic Gold Titans. This one had a weird history. Basically, we saw this at one point before. Apparently, it's been on eBay. Someone maybe bought it, sold it back here. I don't know. It's back and forth. I don't know if it's shilled. I don't know if someone's buying and selling, but basically sold more than the last time we saw it sell. So it'll be interesting to see if that runs again, is the way I'd put it. And $1,000 for what is, I would say, an obscure gold Messi is pretty impressive as well. And here is the Duncan Edwards to match, the rookie pair. PSA Pop 1 of 1, none higher. Not graded all too recent either, which is always something I like to point out. I guess that was like, probably a year ago or something at this point. But usually, I expect 1 of 1, none higher's in vintage almost be, submitted a month ago or 2 months ago, but that's impressive. Then we have a 1985 Adis Calciatori Roberto Baggio. So in this one, this goes for $1,200. Always a fun one because basically you have their names mixed up, but more common not in the panel version. So we see 200, 200. Last panel to sell was a BGS 8 for $720. The PSA 8 sold before that for $2,100. So this is somewhere in between the two. Always comes down to the same thing for me with someone like Baggio. I didn't see him play, so I can't properly rate him, but at least from what I hear, sort of in the same realm as someone like Mark Van Basten, in that type of player. Now, Van Basten has more Ballon d'Ors, so, you can weigh that out however you want. His career ended early, whatever. But basically, Van Basten has like the most rare sticker, at least one of the most talked about rare stickers from this era. And we'll see it here in a bit, but it doesn't do insane numbers. And Baggio has, like 4 different options, all of which do pretty good numbers. So, I understand that these can be seen as cheap compared to what they sold for at times, but at the same time, it's all a scale of where Baggio end. And also, Italy has a lot of supply relatively to most countries, since it's sort of, where soccer collecting is moderately birthed from and sort of the hub of it for a while. So just something to consider. I still think it's a great sticker / panel, and, nothing against it, just throwing my thoughts out there. 2004, this is the Top Liga PSA 9 Messi. I think this is the lighter variant. Basically with this card, it's not fake, I don't believe, because the other side looks very good, but a lot of these have, very clean looking backs and sometimes very light fronts. This gets a PSA 9. Hard to grade these in a 9 and almost impossible in a 10, so that's about as high as you're going to get. 1260 there. I did look this up, or at least I thought I did. There it is. It's hard to tell between the foils and the non-foils, but basically it's been selling between 1,000 to 2,000. And I'd imagine the lighter version probably should sell for less just because it doesn't look as good, but I don't know if the market really cares at this point. Then in this row, we have what I didn't even notice the first go around, kind of a couple very similar but very different looking vintage items. This is a 1936 Leas. This is a very prominent set. So I wanted to go back and sort of, do a little bit of research on this player. I didn't know much about it, if I'm being honest. I'm not that deep on my knowledge of soccer from 100 years ago. I'm young. It'll take me some time to learn about that stuff and whatnot, and I'm interested to an extent. So I looked up the set and basically, how it grades to get some sort of determining factor. If you look here, PSA 5s, there's only 11 of them and 3 6s in total. So out of the almost 100 graded, that's almost as high as you're going to get in terms of grade. The most prominently graded in the set is Carlos Pucel right here, number 3. And then I scrolled on down and basically he does have 2, the guy that we're looking at here. This is a Bernabe Ferreira, maybe. I might have messed that up, but nonetheless, basically I read up on him, and at the time this was like the biggest transfer in South American football. Went on to score basically a goal a game for River Plate, and was a big player for the team. So it seems like a pretty prominent card for the set, at least from what I understand. PSA Pop 1 of 1, none higher. Apparently this had sold prior for near 2,000, and someone took a little bit of a discount here. So don't really understand the logic behind selling the way they did. You feel like this would be something that'd do well on buy it now, but at the same time, if you want money and you have something worth money, then this is a way to do it. And then we have a Ronaldo sticker auto that is player worn next to it for the same price. So, in terms of history and legacy in the soccer world, same price here, at least same value for collectors at the current market. Here we have a 1962 Bobby Moore Bazooka. I did look this up and didn't really find anything. No PSA 5s to sell. There was a PSA 4 that sold for 500, I guess, in March. So that makes this PSA 5 look pretty impressive if it's going for, triple the price. But yeah, other than that, there was a PSA 5 miscut for 660 before, so really nothing to go off of. Apparently, from what I've heard in Discords and all that good stuff, as always, got a few Discord links down below. I have my own, which is just USMNT and really niche. And then there's the 2 main ones that I always hang out in, which is the Vintage and Soccer Study. Great Discords to learn, and if I don't know something, typically I go up to the search feature, type it in, and just do as much reading as I can. But yeah, this was something that wasn't, incredibly valuable back in the day in sort of med grades. Obviously, it had, a spot in the realm, but it wasn't selling for 1,500. So that's a good sale is what I'm saying. And then this row, we keep it GOAT themed. We have an Aquarella. We'll talk more about those in a bit. There's going to be more. Spoiler, 71 Bis. I think that's the only one in this auction going for near 2,000. And then a 1 of 4 dual auto here between 2 of the modern GOATs. In this row, this is one that disappointed me a lot, just looking through here. In my head, mentally, I said, wow, all right. So someone, in theory, you could have spent $7,000 collectively on these 3 cards, and what you would have walked home with is 2 sticker Lionel Messi autos that are both player worn, along with a Diego Maradona SI for Kids perforated card. And to me, that's hilarious. But of course, I don't know. Maybe the buyers are watching this. I don't want to offend, but just sticker autos for $2,000. I understand there's patches. They're kind of from sets that maybe matter. I don't really think so. I'm just saying something to say it. But man, that just feels so strong. Messi, obviously Messi. it basically solidified himself as a GOAT, so I can understand why the GOAT pulls GOAT prices, but man, that just feels like a lot. And then this PSA 10, I think we saw it sell before. I actually looked this up, and we'll see it's basically just gone up and up and up. So, yeah, last PSA 10, I guess I did not see, but it sold for $2K. Before that, it sold for $1,000. Before that, it sold for $1,000. So $1,000, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. Just keeps going up. It was a PSA Pop 1 of 1, now Pop 1 of 2, and that's always something you got to be, a little worried about. And again, perforated edges, I mean, I'll never understand grading perforated edges because you almost can't even grade. You can barely grade corners. You can barely grade edges. I mean, when you look at the front of this, I don't know. I mean, that looks very inconsistent to me. Like, these are all sort of pulled up, and then it looks like these have all been smashed, but I don't understand. There's some whiteness over here. I mean, you can pick apart the cards as much as you want, but I just don't understand PSA 10s on this. Again, edge wear over here. I'm sure this isn't a part of the card, but all down the side, you can kind of see it. I mean, that is like everywhere. And this is a PSA 10 going for $3K. And I think that's just people buying the grade, not the card at all. This is like polar opposite of what everyone says to do. And sometimes I guess it makes sense if it's a highly coveted card, but I don't know if this is. We'll keep moving just before I keep ranting. In the next row, getting into what is, the top 6 here. So PSA 9, Roberto Carlos. This is a rookie sticker for him. In the realm of where we've seen those go, it's a Pop 1 of 5, none higher, at least for the time being. And typically they do 3 to 5K, somewhere in there. Here we have a Lionel Messi Kaboom 2017-10. Did look that up. We'll give it a peek here. Does 3,800 before this, 39, 38, 33, 33, 33. So, I mean, from World Cup times, actually up almost 20%, which isn't too bad at all. From before that, I mean, all-time high was like $6,000, so down 25%. But, I mean, down 25% from all-time highs in soccer is not that bad, at least relative to most. So you take it. 1982, Mark Van Basten. This is what we were talking about earlier. Again, this is sort of what I was referencing. Pop 1 of 8, 6 higher. So in terms of Mark Van Basten, this is a top 15 sticker that you're going to get for him. And PSA actually says, or PWCC says it has a top 15% eye appeal. So in theory, this is like a top 10 Mark Van Basten sticker for the time being. Now, it does have a recent cert number, which is always something to keep an eye on. But 4,000 there. And if we look on over, before this, a PSA 3 did 1,000, PSA 2 did 1,000. I guess if we go further back, PSA 7 for 7,800, PSA 8 for 12,000. So seems to be I guess a fair price, but probably a deal if you're a buyer and trust pre-modern stickers in high grade that are getting graded recently. It's a little worrying, and I mean, with this, there is sort of a tell to look for, but I think PSA has their stuff together, per se, and at least you have the money-back guarantee if not. Into the top 3, though, we have just, 3 Pele grails, I dare say. I mean, when you're priced at this point in soccer, it feels like you have to be a grail, really. But yeah, 2 1958 Aquarellas in a PSA 4 and a PSA 5. This PSA 5 has a PWCC top 15% sticker as well. And then smack dab in the middle, you have an immaculate historical significance BGS 85 of a Pele auto as well. So we'll look at some prices here, just because it makes it, I guess, a little bit more digestible. I will say that these are both blue numbered. This one's blue as well. A helpful member of the Discord did point me in the right direction in terms of these Pele. So basically, the blues were distributed, at least, and stuck into albums for a couple different years. So there's a 1958 album and a 1959, of which blue stickers are present. And apparently in the 1958s, only black stickers are present. So that would lead me to believe that this is sort of a Vanderhoot Cruyff scenario where, you have the same item released for a couple different years. So maybe one day this is a 1958/59/60 or, 58 to 60, however you want to say it. I could very well see that happening. If so, there could be a bigger distinction made by the market in terms of black Aquarellas versus blue Aquarellas. But for the time being, that's not the case, and it really doesn't matter. So we'll just keep looking in terms of this Pele. This is one, again, where, I like to look at pre-boom pricing and see what sort of happened. And, we talked about the titulares earlier, where it's, maybe double at most, while something like this Pele Aquarella is up still 10x. I mean, yeah, you're not at the 40K you were at, but you were at 1K, then it's 40, and somewhere in the middle, I mean, 10 to 20, which is where this has been, drifting between. That's still pretty good, I would say. And that goes to show that seeing these as often as we do does have an impact. I mean, you wouldn't think that these would have done what they have, but I think just because people see them every single week, that, you know, almost anyone that knows Pele can sort of picture this in their mind and associate it with them, while with other things that might not be the case, and that plays a role at the end of the day. And I think that's what we're starting to see. I did take a peek at this just to see, you know, where it's been as well. I like to look back at, you know, everything and see where it was pre-boom to now. This historical significance auto recently sold for 4,000, 8,000, and 8,000. We're close to again. And before the boom, it was 200 to 300. So that is again a very massive move. Obviously, you know, Pele on card autos aren't the easiest to find, distributed in packs and all that good stuff, so I get it, but at the same time, that is a huge move. So very interesting to see, and Pele dominates the day yet again with the top 3 slots. Overall, I would say a pretty nice mix of most everything. And, you know, I don't know if you could read the board behind me today, but I'm trying to suppress my optimism because most of the things we looked at today did pretty well, at least relative to their last sales or the last 3, 6, 9 months. And, you know, I don't know where that's coming from. Most people would presume that middle of the summer would be, you know, some of the lowest sales, especially going into National Week. I don't know if this week's going to, you know, revise people's beliefs in the hobby, or if it's gonna. There seems to be typically a post-national sort of lull where all the people that were building up to it are just kind of sad once it's over. Personally, I'm not going, so you know, I'm just gonna keep on keeping on, just the same way as I do every day. But I'll be interested if you guys are and what ends up happening. I'd love to see how the soccer scene is there, and excited to live vicariously through the Discords. So hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, of course, make sure to leave a like. Let me know that you enjoyed. If there was anything that you saw that you thought so high, low, maybe bought yourself, would love to hear it in a comment down below. And if you want to see more videos like this as soon as I go live, make sure to subscribe. But with that said, hopefully you have a wonderful day, and peace.